Hello everyone, my name is Aaron Christensen, this is Horror 101 with Dr. AC, and welcome back to The Stack. Today we're going to be talking about Stephen King's Thinner, directed and co-written by Tom Holland of Child's Play and Fright Night fame. When I heard this was going to be made into a film, I was very excited. I remember reading this book back when it was written by Richard Bachman. Now, as many of you probably know, Richard Bachman turned out to be Stephen King. But I remember reading Thinner as written by Richard Bachman and thinking, this Richard Bachman is really good. And what's funny is that back in my teens, I had come across a book by Richard Bachman in the horror section of my public library, and it was called The Long Walk by Richard Bachman. And I loved that book. I thought, oh my gosh, Richard Bachman is great. And then here was a new book from Richard Bachman called Thinner. And I read it and I loved it. I was like, this is fantastic. And then, of course, you find out that Richard Bachman is, in fact, Stephen King. And I went, wow, I already love Stephen King. So I guess I love Stephen King again as Richard Bachman. When I heard they were going to be making this into a film, I thought, how are they going to do that? Because the basic story is that we have a lawyer in Maine named Billy Halleck, and he is overweight. I think he's around 300 pounds or so, and he's trying to lose weight, and he can't, and it's frustrating for him. And then one day, there's a gypsy caravan that has come to town to entertain people with the gypsy fair, and he runs over one of the gypsies, and the father of the gypsy comes up and curses him. He strokes his cheek and says, thinner. And from that day on, Billy starts to lose weight at a very dramatic and very unexplained rate. So that's the basic setup. Billy's trying to get the gypsy to take the curse off. The gypsy won't take the curse off, and things continue to escalate. He goes and gets one of his friends who happens to be a mobster, and the mobster tries to put the fear of God into them, and things continue to escalate. And it's a very exciting and dramatic and psychologically disturbing story. So I was very excited when I heard they were making it into a film, and there were so many great people on board. Tom Holland, as I mentioned, is going to be directing. Robert John Burke is someone I've liked for a very long time, back from his early efforts with Hal Hartley, Simple Men, No Such Thing. He might be best known as kind of the guy who took over from Peter Weller for RoboCop. Yeah, he did RoboCop 3. And of course, the great film by Richard Stanley, Dust Devil, where he plays the Dust Devil, and he is one mean motor scooter. We also had Lucinda Jenny as his wife, probably better known today as Mrs. Bill Moseley, character actor Michael Constantine playing the old gypsy, and Joe Mantegna playing our mobster. It just seemed like a great cast, and doing the makeup effects was going to be two-time Oscar winner Greg Canham, who had done the makeup effects for Mrs. Doubtfire and for Bram Stoker's Dracula. So I was very excited to see how this was all going to come together. I remember watching it for the first time and being, let's just say, disappointed. My issue is that the film tries to be kind of jokey and over the top, and when I had read the story, it was very small and psychological and disturbing, and as much a battle of wills as anything else. And if you think about Tom Holland's other projects, like Fright Night, like Child's Play, there is kind of a heightened quality to them. And I got the sense, especially after listening to the commentary, is that Holland was looking to do something that had a little bit more grit to it. Unfortunately, everything is played in kind of a cartoony way. Robert John Burke is buried under this fat suit and the makeup, and his characterization of Billy it's very kind of over the top, and it doesn't feel grounded. It feels like kind of sitcom-y, and that goes for kind of all the performances. Michael Constantine as the gypsy is a legendary character actor, but the makeup doesn't do him any favors. He's supposed to be this 116-year-old character, but instead he just looks like he's got these coats and coats and coats of makeup on him. He looks like a leopard with all of the spots, but they don't look like age spots. They look like he's ill in some way. Actually, it just looks like he's wearing a lot of makeup. And I think that's the problem, is that the makeup by Greg Canham, it is such an impressive feat. And if you think back to what Rick Baker was doing with Eddie Murphy with the Nutty Professor movies, it feels like that. It feels kind of broad and not necessarily believable, but impressive, because this actor is hidden beneath all this makeup. especially somebody who's as recognizable as Eddie Murphy or Robert John Burke. But that cartoony quality, that non-realistic quality, it detracts from the believability of the story. It keeps the viewer at a distance so that we're watching the makeup, but we're not really invested in the story as much as we should be. And the same holds true for Joe Mantegna, who's a wonderful actor, but his characterization as the mobster is kind of scenery chewing. You know, he's a bad guy and he's got his bad goatee beard. So you just know that he's a bad guy. Again, it's just a bit disappointing because this film feels like it has so much potential. And while I'm not someone who usually advocates for remakes, I feel like the special effects have evolved, the technology has evolved to a point where you could actually tell this story in a realistic way. And you could genuinely not think about the makeup. You would just be watching the characters. Because as you're watching Billy waste away from 300 pounds to I think he's, like 120 by the end, it's a terrifying journey. He's basically just disappearing before our eyes. So while I know Thinner definitely has its fans, and there's a lot to enjoy about the movie itself, I don't think it ever succeeds as the definitive screen adaptation of the book. And since I have such love for the book, I would love to see that someday. Now, that said, this release from Shout Factory is quite excellent. Shout Factory doesn't necessarily traffic in a lot of kind of the extra doodads. There's not a lot of, posters or soundtracks or things like that. It does have the cardboard sleeve, so if you're into that, it's just got that kind of iconic poster image. And then the inside shows Billy in kind of his wasting away phase. But what Shout Factory has always excelled in is the special features, and they keep up their track record here. There are three, count them, three audio commentary tracks, one featuring our producer Michael Galen and Joe Mantegna, and our second one is featuring Lee Gambin, who's a fantastic author and film historian, and novelist Aaron Dries, who I'm not as familiar with, but I'm looking forward to listening to their track. And then there's an archival commentary track featuring Tom Holland and Joe Mantegna, and that's the one I listened to this time around, and it was really terrific. And you get the sense that Tom Holland is trying to do something different. He had recently been diagnosed with Bell's palsy when he started the shoot, so he was dealing with that. Expresses so much admiration for Stephen King. You could tell this was a real opportunity for him. He was very excited about it. I wonder if maybe he wasn't the right person for the job. I appreciate the fact that there were some big swings happening here, from the makeup to the adaptation to the tone. There were a lot of challenges here, and unfortunately, I just don't think it quite succeeds as much as it would like to. There are three new featurettes. One's a 15-minute interview with Tom Holland, who is now 80, and he is somebody who doesn't pull any punches. He's clearly still disappointed that the film didn't resonate with audiences. He talks about his admiration for all the makeup artists and the actors and screenwriters. You get the sense that he really wishes this would have landed and been a hit. The next featurette is a 13-minute interview with Lucinda Jenny. And there's also an interview with makeup artist Vincent Guastini, who was Greg Canham's right-hand man on the shoot. He did most of the makeup for Michael Constantine, which I've already expressed. It's not my favorite makeup in the world. And then there's also an archival 20-minute interview with Greg Canham talking about the makeup effects. And again, the makeup effects are really impressive. I think a lot of times it's the lighting that just isn't kind to them. Remember, this was 30 years ago. This was a very ambitious project, and I applaud them for taking it on. It just doesn't quite clear the fence. So that's Stephen King's Thinner from 1996, now on Blu-ray from Shout Factory. Again, it's not my favorite, but for fans of the film, and I know there are quite a few of them out there, this is a fantastic release to pick up because it looks fantastic, and you've got all of those great supplemental features. So I think fans are going to enjoy it quite a bit. Let us know your thoughts on Thinner, and if you check below in the video description, you'll see 5 more titles. You let me know which one you'd like to see taken off the stack. Until next time, keep searching, keep exploring, and keep sharing the scare.